Speaking of bad news for the country, I want to talk about a new rule the Biden administration is putting forward that will make mortgages more expensive for responsible people with good credit scores and do that all to subsidize people with worse credit scores because we're living in the upside down world where sound economics no longer has any relation to policymaking and where we don't believe in meritocracy, but we want to reward poor decisions and punish people who make good decisions. So, Hannah, have you heard about this policy floating around in the news?
I have. Like I said, I've been on vacation the past couple days, so I haven't dug in as deeply as I normally would, but I've seen a few things on TikTok and on Twitter. I think I commented. And I mean, this is just so obviously on its face a bad idea. You don't want to reward people who make poor choices, and then you especially don't want to punish people who do the right things. But increasingly in society, that's how it feels. As somebody who does try really hard to do the right thing at all times and work really hard and be ethical and be fair-minded and just follow the values I was raised with, how you should move about in the world to be a successful and, good member of society. It feels like those things are increasingly looked down upon and punished by actual government intervention. And that is just a recipe for disaster.
And that is exactly what we're talking about here. I'll read you for some details from the Wall Street Journal. Income redistribution is an abiding value of the Biden administration, and now it wants to spread that to mortgage lending. A new rule will raise mortgage fees for borrowers with good credit to subsidize higher risk borrowers. Under the rule, which goes into effect May 1st, homebuyers with a good credit score over 680 will pay about $40 more each month on a $400,000 loan, and upward depending on the size of the loan. Those who make down payments of 20% on their homes will pay the highest fees. Those payments will then be used to subsidize higher risk borrowers through lower fees. And this is all happening because the FHFA regulates federal mortgage guarantors Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are backed by taxpayers, so they can exert this influence on their mortgage policies. So those are the details. We're talking about a significant amount of money, not perhaps an end of the world amount of money, but that adds up to thousands of dollars more over the cost of the lifetime of a mortgage. And I think for me, it's more the principle that's wrong of like punishing the people that have made good decisions and haven't ruined their credit score with reckless credit card spending, to enable the people who have not made good decisions. And also, can we just talk about this for a second? Subsidizing people to get houses they can't actually afford. Where have we heard that before? Kind of sounds like 2008 to me, and that didn't end very well, did it?
It absolutely didn't. I just did the math really quick because one thing I've noticed with these sorts of policies is it sounds kind of small. If you hear it, you're like, oh, $40 a month, like boo-hoo. No, if you have a 30-year mortgage, which is average, that equates to $14,400 more that you have to pay.
Wow, that's not a small amount of money then.
So yeah, not such a small amount. And again, when I think the other thing too is the way they bake this in, it's meant to make it sound like, look, we're just going after the rich. A $400,000 house is no longer the rich in this country. I want to say off the top of my head that the average home price in the country is something like $350,000 to $370,000. So a $400,000 house is very much an average family. You're already looking at having to cough up thousands of dollars, especially now, and extra interest because the government's spending like it just got a 2-week to live chemo diagnosis and printed a whole bunch more dollars. And now you're paying thousands of dollars more in inflation just to buy that $400,000 house. And now they're going to tack this on if you've actually managed to save the money for a down payment. You actually have good credit. That means to have good credit, it's not tough. That means you've paid your bills on time. That means you've been ethical.
You don't have to be rich to have good credit.
No, that has nothing to do with being rich. That has to do with being responsible and making good decisions and doing and repaying your debts as you say that you will, right? And now you're going to pay an extra $14,400 on top of all the extra interest money, on top of the fact that your home price is inflated as well because of the government's intervention into the housing market. It's just, this is the kind of thing that really infuriates me because it is what is killing the middle class. It is absolutely gutting people who simply do the right thing, who want to live modestly, who want to pursue the American dream. They're not asking for much. They just want to play by the rules of the game as they were set out. And they keep getting screwed. And it is infuriating because I don't think that you should be subsidized if you've made poor life choices. I don't think you should be subsidized if you are higher risk, that you are less likely to pay back your investment. I don't think I should have to float you on that. That's just punitive. It's immoral. It's economically backwards. It doesn't in any way suggest that these people who are higher risk will pull themselves out of poverty, because likely if they're not able to pay their bills and within their means, they're not going to do that just because you magically give them a housing loan. That is exactly what we saw happen in the housing crisis. So they gave all these loans to people who should never have been approved for loans because they didn't look like they were probably going to be able to make their bills and make their payments. And then guess what? They didn't. And the housing market collapsed. And guess who else paid for that? The rest of society, because then we all had to go through a very recession. Yes, it is a cyclical formula that keeps replicating, and I'm sick of it. Life is not fair. And I'm tired of people who want to pretend that this is Disney World and that it is. Everybody does start off at different places in life. That's unfortunate, but it's a reality. The thing that we can do is level the playing field, which we tried to do in early America, and say, we're not going to present extra barriers. If you work really hard, you can overcome some of this. There will be class mobility for people who want to work harder. And yes, some people are born wealthier. Some people are born with better parents. Some people are born with more advantages. But that is just life. That is how it is. But as long as you're able to have a fair competition and compete, that's about as fair as it can get in the real adult world. We're removing that element from our society, and it's going to be disastrous because the people who, formerly would do the right thing, who would pay their bills, they're going to get to a point. I already see it happening around me with a lot of people where it's like, why bother? Why bother? Why am I going to work 2-3 jobs to get ahead? Why am I going to live with my parents for 2 years to save up for a down payment? Why am I going to pay back my student loans that I took out? Why am I going to do any of these things when I could not and live recklessly and still end up in the same position? Right.
Yeah.
And so then you've got a lot more people who are living as bottom dwellers, trying to leech off others, a lot fewer people they can leech off of. That game doesn't last very long, folks.
No, and it's a bad idea because it's not just right-wing media or conservatives or libertarians who are calling it out, but you actually have a prominent a former Obama housing official in the federal government, David Stevens, came out and just said this is a terrible idea. Take a listen.
It's very concerning. We're at a period where interest rates have risen. We're all seeing the home sales data and seeing how much home sales are declining because of these rising interest rates. And now we're adding this second whammy to good credit-worthy home buyers who are now going to have to pay for other people's mortgages. Yeah, and that's something that I think is a real bad reaction.
Yeah, so he points out there that housing sales are significantly down and the rising interest rates are already making housing way more expensive to buy a house. And now we're going to just add a cherry to the top to make it even worse, all in service of some nameless equity anti-merit agenda.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster. I've actually already seen several people on TikTok, realtors and other people who are really interested in the real estate market, calling this out and showing properties across the country that they're trying to sell them. They thought they're going to be investment properties. They're not selling. People are already taking hundreds of thousands of dollars of losses on some of these properties that bought high. It's going to come crashing down. I think that maybe not all the way down, because I think there is an actual supply limit that we actually don't have enough houses. So it's not going to bottom out necessarily. But I do think a significant number of people are going to take a bath on some of the properties they bought. And I think right now you're going to see people continue to hold. You're not going to have as much of a buyer's market. So that means people won't have the same mobility they did before. It's not a good idea for anybody who has a house. They want to see their property maintain value and continue to increase in a normal, modest amount year in, year out. That's what you should be able to anticipate. I think these decisions ultimately could stagnate that. And, people in Obama's administration, I would hope at least learn from the lessons they oversaw during the last housing market crisis. So you should probably listen to them.